Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to have you here. All right, let's imagine something. Purely hypothetical. A thought experiment. No panic, just curiosity. So here you are, watching this video. Maybe you're at home, maybe commuting somewhere. An ordinary day. Work, family, bills, weekend plans, everything as usual. Now imagine, tomorrow morning you wake up and the country is gone. Not politically, physically. Half the state's buried under a meter of ash, Washington silent, Wall Street offline, your bank not responding, your card declined. And you're standing in the middle of all this thinking, what now? What about my savings? What about my job? What the hell is happening? Sounds like a movie, right? But here's the thing. Literally beneath our feet, there's something that could make this happen. Yellowstone. That same park where we take our kids to see the geysers. Beautiful place. Bears, bison, Old Faithful every 90 minutes. Except beneath that park sits a magma chamber 40 by 80 kilometers wide. This isn't a volcano in the traditional sense, not a mountain with a hole. It's a bubble of molten rock the size of a small country. And the Earth's crust above it, geologically speaking, is like a lid on a boiling pot. It's already blown 3 times in the last 2 million years. Last time, 640,000 years ago, it ejected 1,000 cubic kilometers of rock. Vesuvius, which buried Pompeii, 3 cubic kilometers. That's a 300-fold difference. When will it blow again? Geologists say the probability within the next century is less than 1%. Sleep well. But for our experiment, let's say it happened. What then? And this is where it gets interesting. Because America isn't just the country where we live. It's the center of the global economy. The foundation everything else rests on. The dollar. 59% of the world's currency reserves. Every central bank on the planet holds trillions in our bonds. International trade, 88% of transactions go through the dollar. Egypt buys oil from Saudi Arabia, pays with our money. Technology. The internet is our invention. The servers are here, Amazon, Google, Apple, the entire digital infrastructure of the planet. Pharmaceuticals, 40% of global spending on drugs. We don't just buy, we fund the research. Remove all of this, and the world crumbles. Not just us, everyone. What happens in the first hours? Panic on the exchanges, but strange panic. The dollar doesn't fall at first, it spikes. Why? Because everyone in the world has dollar-denominated debt. Companies, banks, governments, everyone owes someone dollars. When chaos hits, everyone rushes to close positions. They need dollars, urgently, at any price. This lasts a day, maybe 2, then it sinks in. The Federal Reserve isn't responding. The Treasury is silent. Washington is under ash. There's no one to guarantee our debt. And then the dollar collapses, minus 50% in a day, minus 70. Free fall. 8 trillion that other countries held in our bonds, Japan, China, Britain, turns to paper. That's the end of day 1. And we're somewhere in the middle of it, with cards that don't work, with banks that are closed, with dollars worth who knows what. All right, the dollar crashed. Our bonds are garbage. What's next? For us, chaos. But let's zoom out. What happens to the global economy when its center vanishes? Here's a simple example. An oil tanker sailing from the Persian Gulf to Japan. Contract. $100 million for the cargo. The tanker's in the ocean, oil in the hold. But dollars, in the usual sense, no longer exist. The Saudis say, we want euros. The Japanese say, we have yen. Insurance companies refuse to cover it. Unclear what currency to price the risk in. Banks won't open letters of credit. The tanker sits in the middle of the ocean, and there are thousands like it. Container ships with electronics, thousands. Cargo planes, thousands. Global trade doesn't stop completely. It gets tangled. Every deal becomes a separate negotiation. How much does a barrel of oil cost? 100 different prices in 10 different currencies. A month later, an emergency summit. G20 minus 1, minus us. Europe, China, Japan, trying to agree on a new system. And it turns out nobody's ready. The euro is the world currency. China's against it. Too much power to Europe. The yuan? Japan and Europe don't trust Beijing. A basket of currencies? Too complicated. Takes too long. The result? Fragmentation. The world splits into zones. Europe trades in euros. Asia tries to build something around the yuan. Between zones, barter, complex schemes, constant haggling. Now, debts. The interesting part. Global debt, $300 trillion, a significant portion in our currency. The contract says, owe $100 million, but the dollar swings tenfold in a week. How much do you actually owe? Courts are overwhelmed. Half the contracts in the world are in legal limbo. Some countries simply zero out dollar debts, convert them to their own currency. Creditors are furious. Banks worldwide, technically bankrupt. Their assets, Our bonds, which worth zero. Their liabilities, people's deposits, what is still there. Governments nationalize, inject money, save what they can. Lines at ATMs, classic panic, only global. A quarter later, the acute phase passes. But global trade has shrunk by 40%. Not because there's nothing to sell, the mechanism broke. And what about us? Those who survived? The East Coast, the South, less ash there. People are alive, but the federal government isn't functioning. No communication between regions. Electricity spotty, gasoline scarce. Food? It depends where you are. The dollar still circulates inside the country. Out of habit, but prices jump every day. Today, bread costs $5, tomorrow $15, day after. Cash only, no cards. People start trading directly. Barter. Like 100 years ago. You have gas, I have food. We'll work it out. This is our new reality. 1 year later, the ash has settled. What do we see? The global economy, minus 30 to 40% of GDP in the first year. The Great Depression of the 30s, minus 15. This is twice as bad. Europe, 25% unemployment. The political system cracking. The European Union in question. China, catastrophe. Their model, selling to us. We were their biggest customer. 300 billion a year. Evaporated. 100 million workers without jobs. Social explosion. Developing countries, even worse. Mexico, Vietnam, Bangladesh built their economies around exporting to us. Now, mass unemployment, hunger, migration waves. But from the chaos, something new emerges. The world understands depending on one center is deadly. Can't put all your eggs in one basket, especially if the basket sits on a volcano. Deglobalization. Europe builds its own supply chains. Asia, its own. Every region tries to become self-sufficient. More expensive, slower, worse, but independent. Technological progress slows down. Silicon Valley, under ash. Half the world's IT companies gone. New drugs, new technologies, on everything slower. And us? What about America? No federal government. States act on their own. Texas declares independence. They've wanted to for a long time, now they can. California, separate, if it survived. The Northeast, its own coalition. Florida, on its own. The former USA, several nations. Their own currencies, their own armies, their own borders, sometimes in conflict. And nuclear weapons. 5,500 warheads. Who controls them? Which state? Which general? What if different commanders make different decisions? A question on which humanity's survival depends. All right, we exit the experiment. Take a breath. Yellowstone probably won't blow tomorrow or in 100 years. Geologists are watching. Instruments are running. Probability, fractions of a percent. But here's what's important to understand. We, Americans, live at the center of the global system. We take it for granted. The dollar is the main currency. Our companies are the biggest. Our military is the strongest. But this system, it's fragile. One event, and everything falls apart. Not just for others, for us first. And you don't need a supervolcano for that. A cyber attack on the financial system would do. A political crisis that paralyzes Washington. We've already seen how a pandemic shook everything. How a container ship in the Suez Canal created shortages worldwide. Yellowstone is just a way to ask the question, what if? And the answer isn't comforting. There's no plan B, not for the world, not for us. What to do personally? Nothing special. Don't keep all your savings in one place. Have cash at home. A couple weeks' supply of food and water. Skills that are useful no matter what. Not paranoia. Common sense. We live in the richest, most powerful country in history. But it stands on a volcano. Sometimes, literally.
So that's how the experiment turned out. If you found it interesting, subscribe, hit like. Next time we'll talk about something more cheerful. Maybe. See ya.